bit of time later.
Sure.
There's a group of ladies on the internet. Anyway, they want to do a shoe box, sort of like the little library boxes at the playground. And, you know, they'll be in charge of it. I think one of the ladies is going to get somebody to make it, and they'll maintain it and keep it clean and cleaned out and all that stuff. You guys okay with that?
It's fine with me.
You okay with
Yeah,
that?
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. Okay. They just said that there's a lot of children that come down there and they get really, really dirty, or their shoes get wet, or socks get wet, and then there's some that are a little bit needy, and it just to be a way that they can recycle things. So I thought it was a pretty cool idea myself.
Well, I guess we do have a quorum here, so we could maybe discuss a couple of items not on the agenda, and then include Vice Mayor Dalton in when she arrives. I had a similar item to share.
Okay.
I'm really excited to announce that our local chapter of the Tennessee Bluebird Society has selected White Oak Park as the next location for a bluebird trail. They were advised by Dr. David Aborn, the ornithologist and assistant professor of biology, geology, and environmental science at UTC, that White Oak Park is an ideal nesting location for bluebirds because it has wide open spaces and water. A bluebird trail consists of a number of bluebird-specific nesting boxes spaced about 100 yards apart and located so they can be conveniently monitored on foot. The Tennessee Bluebird Society would like to volunteer to build, monitor, and maintain a bluebird trail with 12 nest boxes at White Oak Park. Does anybody have any objections to anything like that?
That's a great idea.
Okay. They did ask if the city would consider providing a small allowance to the volunteers for the purchase of materials to build the bluebird boxes. The boxes cost $40 each in materials to build, and so for 12 boxes it would cost $480 in materials. Would that be objectionable to anyone to provide them with that allowance?
And who would be paying for that?
I'm asking if it would be all right with everyone if the city provided an allowance to the
The
volunteers.
city of Red Bank would be paying for that.
Yes.
I'm asking.
Yes.
Yes.
And then the volunteers would be building
Do
them
we
with no
have
labor
that
cost.
somewhere in our budget that we can pay for that?
Do we have the funds available, Tim?
Yes, I think I can arrange that.
Would that be agreeable to everyone?
I think that's fine.
The only caveat that I get is that we gotta advertise this.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. You two ladies have been doing a fantastic job on the Facebook post. Not that I ever look at it, but I hear from people.
Oh, yes, we will be happy to publicize this as much as possible.
And I think the stuff for public land is probably, depending on along the
Along
connector,
White
right?
Oak. Well, they wanted to start in White Oak Park, and
Okay.
then they considered extending it along the connector in the future.
Okay.
Which is, depending on how it goes.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and move into our agenda items then. The first item on the agenda, location of future meetings. I asked that be added, but it is conditional upon the accessibility of Wi-Fi at the community center, and that's not up and running yet, so I'm just going to go ahead and table that discussion and move on to the next item, which is the RFP ordinance. So would anybody like to comment on that?
Yes, I added that again. I wasn't sure if Vice Mayor Dalton was ready to discuss it yet. If she's not, she could table it also, but if she is,
I am. Well, to kind of have a little more context. So I found out about, just in doing some more research about like sale and disposition and development of property, of public property, came across the Tennessee Code statute, which I know that MTAS reached out to you guys and talked to you about. It's TCA 13-4-104. And it specifically has to do with the Planning Commission approval of proposed construction. And I'm talking about that because it relates back to the RFP procedure. So in talking with our MTAS consultant, legal consultant, Ms. Hodge, that this is interpreted to say that anything, I could read it to you all, or I can read the main parts. It says, whenever the commission shall have adopted the plan of the municipality or any part thereof, which is our Red Bank 2035 plan, then and thenceforth no street, park, or public way, ground, place, or space, no public building or structure, or no public utility, whether publicly or privately owned, shall be constructed or authorized in the municipality until and unless the location and extent thereof shall have been submitted to and approved by the Planning Commission. And then down further, there's some other clarifying language, and then down below it says the widening, narrowing, relocation, vacation, change in the use, acceptance, acquisition, sale, or lease of any street or public way, ground, place, property, or structure shall be subject to similar submission and approval to the Planning Commission. And as related to this procedure, I don't believe that we have been following that statute as far as I know, as far as submitting these kinds of constructions or authorizations, proposed constructions to the Planning Commission first. And I would like to see us start following that state law in the future as related to the Planning Commission, and specifically in reference to this procedure, since it has to do specifically with the sale, development, and disposition of public property, which the Planning Commission would have to approve or review and make approval or recommendation of. I would like to see the draft of this ordinance, which also there is a discrepancy with our agenda. It says discussion of RFP ordinance, and then the draft is a resolution. I would like to see it drafted as an ordinance, and I would like it to go before the Planning Commission before it comes up to us.
The procedure itself.
Yes.
So it sounds like most projects are supposed to go before the Planning Commission,
Well, that's my understanding.
or all?
And from my discussion with Ms. Hodge, that is appropriate. So sidewalk projects, crosswalks, development of public property, anything like that. Before, we would vote on it, the Board of Commissioners would vote on it.
If I may, Vice Mayor, I did read that ordinance, and it says it must go before them, but there's nothing in there that says it's gotta go first.
Well, right, we could draft something first.
Okay, well, and the way, if you will, in my opinion, because I've talked to Mr. Cannon also,
Oh.
we gotta come up with the idea and send it to them. Otherwise, they're gonna come up with all the ideas, and they're not an elected board. And I wanna make sure that
Okay.
we're directing
Yeah.
that if we get let's just use this piece of property next door here,
Right.
that we purchased. Are you saying that we had to take it to the Planning Commission first?
That is what the statute, no, the
It doesn't
statute,
say it has to go there first.
the statute, before we vote, the legislative body votes, it is supposed to go before the Planning Commission. So what should have happened is there should have been a draft of the sale agreement or whatever. That goes to the Planning Commission, they make the recommendation, and then it comes up to us, and they can approve it or not. And then regardless of whatever they decide, we can still vote however we want. We don't have to vote in line with the Planning
I
Commission.
agree. I read that in there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's,
It would still be a recommendation like we kind of.
absolutely, they don't have any extra power, it's just, like, they're supposed to be reviewing these things ahead of time,
Can I interject?
ahead of a
I
vote.
think you made a misstatement inadvertently. You have to send, it would be appropriate to send the concept to them.
Oh, okay.
We're thinking, the city's thinking of buying Blackacre for $500. What do you think? We don't know what we're going to use it for, but it's a good deal, just like over here. And we need to jump on it.
Mhm.
But to say to send them the contract, that's not an accurate.
Okay.
They have nothing to do with the contract.
Okay,
But the concept would be appropriate.
right, and like with the development of middle school property, in developing an RFP, we should have sent, ideally we would have sent that according to this law.
Ideally.
Yeah, just with the way that this is worded, would have sent that before the planning commission first, and then they would have made recommendations about any other potential criteria or whatever that might need to be included that would align it with the Red Bank 2035 plan, since they are planners and that has to do with land use. So, you know, just like with that in mind, that's why I wanted to, not necessarily table this discussion, but bring that into as part of the discussion. I mean, possibly table the discussion, or go ahead and send a draft of an ordinance to the planning commission to review, again, since it has to do with the sale, development, or disposition of real property, public property, for them to review, just like they've done with the chicken ordinance.
Again, for a recommendation or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, help me understand here. You would prefer to see what is now in the form of a resolution as an ordinance passed on and binding on this commission until it's changed. But this ordinance is not a sale. It's not a project. It's not a development. It is a outline and a process for doing those things that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And forgive me if I misunderstood you, but that's exactly what this policy does. It refers things to the planning commission after a basic determination of what the city wants to consider doing.
For the sale, development, and disposition of real property.
Right.
Right. Yeah, and that's why I was tying it in, but this state statute actually says anything that has to do with any kind of change in use, relocation, vacation, widening, narrowing, acceptance, acquisition, etc. So these things should be going before the planning commission anyway. Those types of things should be going before the planning commission for review and recommendation. I'm only talking about the sale part because that's what this discussion was
Okay,
about today.
I'm sorry. I thought you wanted those sorts of things incorporated into...
No.
Like I said, forgive me if I misunderstood.
I mean, and this is state law, so it preempts, you know, anything that we would try to establish as far as, you know, procedure, like that sets the procedure, and then we can have these further details like you have, you know, drafted in this resolution, that I would like to see as an ordinance.
If I may, though, let me run a little devil's advocate on you here. I would see it that we would come up and say, hey, you know what we want to do is we want to put over here, we want to put 5 acres of a park over here, and we want to put these building developments over here. This is kind of what we are seeing. And then we take it to the planning commission and say, does that fit our long-range plan? And then they make their recommendations to us, but they do not come to us with the plan. So if we got to go to them first, you see what I'm saying? Then we're kind of waiting on them to direct us instead of us directing them.
I think maybe...
Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
I think so, because I'm saying when a project comes up, like sidewalk project, according to this, that should go for review before the planning commission to have a recommendation made on that, because it has to do with change in use, narrowing, widening, etc. of that public.
Okay.
That would be after I went through the process,
Yes.
got all the plans
Yes,
done and
right.
all that. Then
Yes.
you'd send it to them,
Yes.
they could say, hey, looks great, we recommend it. Or they could say, hey, what about this or
Right,
that?
exactly.
Before you guys approve it.
That's exactly right. So I'm saying, like, once we come up with these projects or things that we think need to be done, and then we have a draft or there's a whole plan made out, it goes to the planning commission before we vote on it. That's all.
So that's not happening now then?
No.
Not on everything, no.
Okay.
We didn't, we haven't, as long as I've ever been associated with the city, if we decide to pave a road, we don't send it to the planning commission.
Mm-hmm.
Because frankly, the 5 people up here want to be involved in that. Pave this road, don't pave that road, we need to pave this or that one. That happens frequently, and I'm using that as a silly example. But a technical, close reading of the statute, the vice mayor is accurate.
But if we're adding new roads,
Oh, yes, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see that, but if we're repaving the road, I don't see
I don't think
the,
it covers repaving, it says widening or narrowing.
right, all right.
Well, I did talk with Ms. Rogers with MTS, and she did say that, you know, we could look at establishing kind of like a operational procedure as far as, you know, making a list of these types of projects, and these go, you know, get seen by the planning commission every time, you know, for this, and this, and whoever else, utility companies, whoever else needs to be involved in reviewing these things before a change is made or development or construction occurs. And then, you know, so she's looking into that, and she is planning to get back to me.
Okay, well, we got one on our agenda, the street lights, okay? Does that need to go before them?
What's that?
The street lights upgrades?
The signalization project?
Yeah,
Oh,
No, that's already done.
okay.
yeah, I would assume, since it's, like, that's retroactive, like, that's already in place.
But let's say it comes tomorrow.
Yeah,
That would be part of the planning commission?
or public, yeah, I mean, no building or, public building or structure, no public utility, way, ground, place or space. It's comprehensive of all of those things.
It is indeed.
All right, well, you know, my only fear is being held up by somebody else, you know, on certain things.
I don't suspect that we're going to have like a whole bunch of new projects that, you know, are going to slow the whole process down.
Yeah, the ancillary parts of it provide that if you refer a matter to the planning commission and no recommendation is forthcoming within 30 days.
Okay.
Correct.
And so this policy here actually is expanded to say 60 days because of the, on unique properties, exactly like the middle school property up there, to give time for due consideration.
So,
Neither does the 30-day requirement prohibit the city from acting in emergency circumstances.
Right.
Okay.
so
it's
it's
just
a,
it'll just be a different way of sort of moving some responsibilities that have always been subsumed by the commission and by the city manager into a more formalized process. But the city commission maintains control ultimately.
That's correct. It still comes up to us for a vote. And we don't have to vote in line with the recommendation of the planning commission.
But basically, with all the long-term, all the development and everything, they just take it, run it through the filter, say,
Correct.
does this make our long-term plan?
Correct.
Right, I mean, that's what we have them.
That's right.
My understanding is it's specifically to hold it up against, like, the Red Bank 2035 plan and say, you know, does this project make sense with our long-term goals, with each important project that comes.
Which is the beginning of it, you know, when we've adopted that plan as a municipality, which we have. So that's how that catches that.
Well, I also come from the old school of, you know, the plan means nothing and planning means everything, which is one of those things of, you know, the last time that we went over this 2035 plan was what, 2012?
2014 was when it was
14,
issued.
all right. Well, it's a little long in tooth,
It
you
is.
know. I would like to see, now let's look, you know, because there's probably a lot of things, you know, we need to start, you know, having a star to sail by, I guess you would, you know. And I'd like to see, because there's a lot of things changed since 2014. So that'd be my recommendation.
So, okay, so with that piece, there's the other part, right, that future projects and such are going to start going before being presented, sent to the planning commission. Once we have everything prepared, they review it, make a recommendation, and then we get it. And then with regard to this, I actually did have some notes actually specifically about the draft, Arnie.
Okay.
And I don't know if anybody else had any other notes about this, but you referenced about voting for the property as, or once the property had been declared surplus real property. But when does that occur, I guess, within the context of this?
Before any sales are contemplated.
Okay.
And upon a determination either initiated by the city manager or the topic being broached by one or more of the commissioners that, hey, when we widened Oak Street, we left a little sliver of city property. We don't need it, we don't want it, what are we going to do with it? And so that's one of the categories. We kind of got two categories of property. One of the categories being surplus in that we don't need it anymore. And so there's a set of procedures that always involve the planning commission for that. But the city commission sort of says, hey, we know we don't need this, send it over there, we're going to try to sell it. We think we ought to try to sell it, let's see what the planning commission says. The planning commission determines its own rules and procedures about how to consider that, and they may just say, sure, it makes perfect sense, or they might have an idea for a pocket park. Whatever happens, it comes back in a recommendation, and the city commission decides what to do with it. More tellingly and more importantly, there's a second category of property that's not technically surplus in that it may be purchased for the purpose of doing something else with it, or it may be as a consequence of occurrences, development trends in the area, a piece of property that, say, the city acquired in a back tax sale, and that happens some. Now has some significant amount of worth, and then there's a process for, again, determining whether the city wants to, and I know we've had the term pocket park mentioned. Do we want a pocket park there? That would go, the commission and would say, well, this would be a good place for a pocket park. That's what we think ought to happen. We're going to refer it to the planning commission with a basic plan or without a basic plan. Give us your 2 cents worth, comes back for the city. In the context of property that acquires some inordinate value or represents a opportunity for the city's future, such as exactly the piece of property up here, then there's a process that again goes to the planning commission for their 2 cents worth, whether it's in a general concept form or whether it's in a plan, basic plan form. And then there are hearings, and so it has to have at least 2 hearings. One in the initial processes, which is what I think everyone had to ask for, and a second one before a final plan or disposition is had. Again, a planning commission input and a public hearing on that before a vote takes place. It also provides that the commission can decide upon additional layers of public input or public hearing for unique circumstances, which we all know and understand that this is a unique, once-in-a-lifetime piece of property in the city.
Correct.
So that's the basic thought process behind it.
With that and what I mentioned before, though, with an RP for that type of public property, according to the statute, just looking at that and referencing back, it does seem like that RP should have gone before the planning commission, correct? Before being approved by the board and released?
Don't confuse what happened before.
Oh, no.
With a request for input with a contract that's being let or proposed.
But
A contract and a particular sale should have gone to the planning commission under a strict interpretation of that statute. Yes.
so you don't think that the planning commission should have reviewed the request for proposals before it was released to the public?
Under a strict interpretation of the statute, that would have been the better way to do it.
Okay, I'm just looking at if we were to look at reissuing an RFP with, modernized or added criteria.
This would require that.
Okay. Okay.
Sure.
Also, something that I had come across in information that not come across, but that MTAS sent me regarding an AG opinion on a property, public property that was sold in another place. One of the issues that came up was that they failed to, they failed to notify abutting or adjoining properties of the potential sale of this public property. Is that something that needs to be done?
I don't think it's required to be done. We notify people whenever we rezone property.
Correct.
But because that's what the statute requires and that's what the city requires, because we want citizens' input. There are multiple layers of citizen input here. I don't think that's a necessary addition that you advise adjoining property owners, but it's certainly something that can be put there if that's what the commission wants to do.
I would like to see that added, especially in, again, I'm not trying to make this a specialized case by continuing to refer to the middle school property, but because it is, you know, it is something that is looming over our future. They were not notified that this RFP had been released. And this is a very important piece of property, like a unique situation like we talked about at the last meeting. And I do feel that property owners should be aware when there is a public piece of property that is potentially going to be sold or developed. Looking at the idea is being discussed at it being potentially sold or developed on. I do believe that citizens should be notified, adjoining or abutting citizens, property owners.
Just from a practical standpoint, when we were door knocking in that neighborhood that directly was adjacent to the middle school property, our property owners seemed disappointed and sometimes upset that this was, a change this big was about to happen and that they hadn't been notified about it. So I think just from a standpoint of like a positive interrelations between the city government and the citizens, I think that would be a positive step to take.
It can be added in without any difficulty. Of the writing it out, it presents logistical issues and another step.
And if I may, was it publicly, with this RFP, was it publicly said that we're going to send this out?
Yes.
So some of this is some of the citizens' responsibility to check in with their government because it was advertised, but now we don't have to knock on your door.
No, with a certified letter is a much lower bar than knocking on the door.
Well, a certified letter is knocking on the door. You're just using the post.
Yeah. If we do it for rezoning properties, though, I feel like public properties, everybody has much more investment in the community, and that.
Well, and again, if I may, I think before we put this in a resolution, okay, this is one of those things that's kind of our job, you know. Our job is to advertise this stuff, make sure that it's aware, make sure that the paper has it, make sure that it is advertised out there. But I don't know if we, and if I'm the only one, then fine. But I just don't want to. I don't want to go into overthinking something that will not benefit us in the very long run. You know, it might work great here, but and you know, how many people are we talking about? How far is the zone? Is it across the street? Is it on the next block? Is it adjacent, abutting? Where is our cutoff on that? So all this will have to be put in the resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, so I kind of think that, you know, there is an advertisement of the RFP, and it's out there. So some of it is citizen responsibility.
To borrow your phrase, devil's advocate.
Okay.
I agree that it is the job of the elected officials to do their best to make sure that citizens are made aware of the current happenings.
Well, yeah. Well, and what I'm kind of saying is, you know, let's bark or blow our own horn.
Sure, but to that own, you know, having knocked on over 1,000 doors during my campaign, I would very much like to borrow the post office to do that. And, you know, given that being a commissioner pays $100 a month and mayor a whopping 300, 200, 200, 300, it's hardly practical.
Oh, I'm not saying
Yourself
we're...
ragged to not
No,
knock
no,
doors
no,
ourselves.
don't misunderstand me. I'm not
Okay.
saying we knock on the door.
Okay.
All we gotta do is announce it publicly. And then there's certain things that the, you know, unless you're just got your hole in the head in the hole, then you're gonna know about it. It's, I just don't want us to overburden Tim and his thing, because every time there'll be a property for sale, everybody around there's gotta get a certified letter. You know.
I think it's pretty rare that we would have a public property for sale or development, so I don't think it's too much to ask to have that in there. But in from that regard, because it's not gonna be happening all the time like these rezoning requests are, right? Those happen
Well-
fairly frequently. And there's definitely a cost associated with that.
Now, it's my opinion that we have a greater obligation to our citizens to make sure that they're aware of these things than
Yeah.
just making it on our agenda that
What do we
we
do
have a
now?
website to look at.
Why don't I draft in a revised draft of the ordinance, a parallel provision to the zoning notifications, and I'll put it in red line and everybody can see it, and then it can be discussed and voted on.
That'd be fine.
Perfect.
Sounds great.
Does that make sense?
That's
Yes.
great.
That's great.
Thank you so much, Armin.
All right. Any more comments on the RFP ordinance before we move on to the next item?
No?
All right, so number 3 is discussion of the chicken chicken ordinance. We can make those two. Chicken ordinance. So the planning commission has returned their recommendations to us, and we have their adjustments to the draft in red. They made some changes, which I think are great. Saying property must be zoned R1 or R1A. It cannot be bordering Stringer's Branch for water quality concerns, which is important. It also allowed for mobile chicken coops and prevented them from being on vacant lots. They have to be on primary residential lots. So I think those were all very thoughtful additions. A few adjustments that I'd like to propose to this draft. Our current ordinances already allow for chickens, goats, pigs, cows, etc. on lots greater than 2 acres. It's been that way as long as, it's always been that way, I think. So I don't see, given that that hasn't been an ongoing issue with the city, I don't see any reason to change the rules for any properties over 2 acres. I'd like to see this draft just minorly revised to say, it shall be unlawful for any person to keep ducks, geese, or other fowl in the city of Red Bank on less than 2 acres, with the exception of female chickens by permit, as provided in this section. And then there's a few other small sections later on in the ordinance that reference the 2 acres. So I think given that it hasn't been a problem, we could just drop that, and this application is exclusively for people wanting to keep chickens on less than 2 acres. Then there was some minor wording in Part 3, Item G, references the inside and outside dimensions of the enclosure. The very last sentence of Item G, the enclosure shall provide a minimum of 2 square feet of space inside for each bird. Just earlier it says the enclosure shall be a minimum of 8 square feet per chicken. So the 8 square feet references the outside enclosure, and the 2 square feet references the inside enclosure. And I think that's a little unclear, so we just add inside enclosure to that for clarity.
Where are we looking at this red line, or are we looking at the ordinance itself? Because I'm looking at...
Keeping this page,
What
keeping
section number?
Section number 3,
Yes.
Item G.
G, I'm sorry. I was hearing D.
Oh, yeah,
Sorry.
mass don't have, Item G, the very last sentence should just say the inside enclosure, or the interior enclosure shall provide.
So you want it to be 8, which is gonna...
Oh, no.
Well, that's the 2 square inside. So
Yes,
it could
yes.
be sheltered from the weather.
Yeah, it just needs to stay inside there, just because it says 8 square feet, and then it says 2 square feet, one after the other, and it doesn't specify what the difference is.
It does say inside, the
Okay.
last sentence. 2 square feet of space inside for each bird.
Well, when I read it, I found it confusing. Maybe that's just me, but I think if we said, since the previous sentence says the size of any outside enclosure shall be, then I think this phrase should mirror the size of any inside enclosure shall be.
So you want to add the word enclosure.
The enclosure already there.
The size.
I want to say
Wants to add
inside.
the size of any interior enclosure, right?
Yes,
Okay.
just for clarity.
While we're on the G,
Yeah?
we originally had 10 feet, and they have moved it to the outside, there's a maximum of 10 feet, and they have moved it to
Minimum.
a minimum of 8 feet. Was there a particular reason for that?
I believe Commissioner Luther was the one who made that recommendation based on his research.
Okay.
So he might be able to provide clarification for you on that item.
So there's no maximum then?
The maximum is your setback requirements from the,
Right.
Minimum of 8 square feet per chicken on the outside of the enclosure, which, you know, I think that's a little bit, 10 feet would be better, but I'm okay with it. He knows more about chickens than I do.
Yeah. If I'm reading this accurately, this suggested change, there was, the way the ordinance was originally drafted, 8 birds, and you could have a maximum of 10 square feet for 80 square feet, right? So that there would be, and then you had the setback lines, which would also define the size of the enclosure. But this, the way it's revised here, says that for 8 square chickens, you have to have it. 8 chickens, which is the maximum number, you have to have a minimum of 64 square feet, but there is no maximum for the size of the chicken coops, except as defined by the setback lines.
Correct.
So a larger lot could have a bigger coop, but they couldn't have any more chickens.
It just makes it a little more humane if they've got a little bit more room to me. But I'm okay with it.
But it doesn't say, you know, the minimum, it doesn't define how big the chicken coop can be, except as set out by the number of chickens and the setback lines. So you could have a lot of square feet for each of the 8 chickens. Hens.
All right, in the construction materials, number 3, item, Roman numeral 2, the materials used in making the enclosure shall be uniform. Use of scrap, wasteboard, sheet metal, or similar materials to construct the enclosure is prohibited. Does that include like tin roofing material?
That's the intent.
It
Is
does.
that prohibited for residential structures in
It-
Red Bank?
It's prohibited in our commercial zoning, metal siding, but
What about residential?
it doesn't, the design review doesn't reference.
The roofing
Residential.
material?
No.
Okay. If it's not outlawed for residential applications, then I wouldn't see why to prohibit it from a chicken coop. Because a metal roof makes a very long-lasting and strong and efficient, affordable roof design for a homemade coop. That's my personal opinion, especially since the ordinance further states that it can't be visible from the street.
I think maybe the heat factor. I mean, you know, if you've got chickens in there and that little's going to draw heat and it's going to make your chickens anything, that'd be my thought.
Would that be hotter than like a black asphalt roof shingle?
I would think so.
Help me see again where you're talking about.
Number 3, under H, And then further, item II, materials.
Okay. I went on over to the outline. Sorry.
Okay.
The wood and the asphalt would be a little bit more insulation, from the wood and insulation factor.
It says, it says right here, the same material, the roof has the same shingles or other covering. They're just saying you can't use, the way I understand this is you can't use woods, tin, and whatever.
For the wall.
Around the outside.
Oh,
On the outside,
The wall, that was
the facade of the structure.
Okay.
No, to construct the enclosure. Okay.
Walls are made of the same,
Okay.
yeah.
So it just can't be used for the enclosure, it can't be used for the roof.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I grew up around chicken coops and yards and property, and there were, and I know this is talking 60 years ago, but people would use any kind of junk that they had, and they looked awful. But it was an acceptable circumstance at the time in the county and whatnot. And so I was trying to keep it a little bit more uniform
Classy.
for not necessarily the chickens' roof, but I wasn't protecting the chickens as much as I was trying to consider me living next door to somebody with a junky chicken coop like I used to sit growing up. That's what my thought was.
Well, that's what I pulled out of it, because I remember the same thing.
I misunderstood. I didn't see that the no sheet metal applied to the walls of the enclosure. I was thinking for roof specifically.
You know, you can airflow, you know.
And then the one other thing is I did send this draft to McCamey, as they are our contracted animal control, and so they will likely be the ones getting calls if there are any chickens on the loose or anything like that. And they did mention that they would either need to be the ones that issue the permit, or at the very least they would be needing to receive copies of all the permits on file so they can enforce properly. All right. Does anybody else have any comments on the chicken ordinance?
I just like the idea of Mr. Luther's mobile chicken coop.
Yeah.
I thought that was good.
I am very glad he included allowances for that, because that is kind of the new way that coops are going, especially for backyard chicken.
And I talked to him earlier today, and he is working on a packet, an educational packet, that would be presented to somebody applying for a permit, so they know what they're getting into before they just decide to go get a couple of chickens. He grew up raising chickens and has been around them his whole life, so, and is doing a lot of extra research, so I appreciate him and his work that he's done towards this.
All right, we'll make these changes and get it back in front of you.
Okay. The very last thing I'd like to bring up with the chicken ordinance before we move on is the property not less than 1/2 acre. I do have some concerns that less than half of our residential lots are over 1/2 acre. 1/3 an acre is a very common lot size in Red Bank. And with a 25-foot setback requirement on all sides of all adjacent property lines, it would require, you know, a 50-foot wide lot would have 0 feet left for coop. So if we're talking about, you know, a 16-foot coop, we're talking about a minimum lot size of, you know, 65, 75 feet before it's even feasible to get across. So, and that's if it was a stationary coop. A mobile coop would need an even larger lot in order to be able to be moved within the setback requirements. So it's my personal opinion that somebody who can meet setback requirements safely could keep chickens without keep chickens without being a nuisance.
You got it? I think we're being very generous from going from 2 acres to a 1/2 acre. And this is just a trial. I would prefer to keep it at a 1/2 acre. I don't know about the rest of you, but that's my feeling.
I'm fine with that. I mean, I think if we're doing a trial anyway and seeing how it works, then we can reevaluate it in a year.
All
I
right,
agree with you.
I agree.
okay. Any other comments? All right, moving on to item number 4, award.
Wait a minute, we kind of glossed over the whole application process here.
Oh, okay.
Who determined the $50?
I think.
I did. That's our basic permit fee on everything we have.
Okay, well, I was just wondering, does
Yeah.
that cover our nuts?
It'll cover the inspections and all that.
Okay, that's all I wanted, thank you. Okay, thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
No problem. So item number 4, awards and presentations, Fairbanks resolution. Commissioner Janot approached me after we volunteered at the food pantry on April 1st and asked if she could be the one to present the awards since she goes way back with the Fairbanks family, and I thought that sounded like a lovely idea. So I'll be turning that over to her. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that item?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Then, item number 5, formalizing agenda work session meetings, and that's a resolution. Does anybody have any comments on that?
Well, all I can say is a good find. I mean, we probably shouldn't have been doing this for a long time. It's just kind of one of those things that kind of slipped under the radar. And one of those things, and then we have the freedom to sit up here and talk about things that are not on the agenda during our work session.
Yeah. Alright. I'm trying to shuffle through my
Yeah.
There's enough of them.
40-page packet here to make sure I didn't have any notes on that. Okay, there's citizen advisory boards. Agenda work session, did you have these? I think we had page numbers on the whole packet.
I meant to go through the staple mine.
Yeah, stapling would be a good idea. Real property.
I don't think we really have any amendments, Mr. Schultz, did we? Asking you to add to this after
To
the
which one? I'm
the work
sorry?
session, the formalization.
Formalization of the work
I
session.
don't recall any,
Yeah, I don't.
and I usually take pretty good notes.
Because we discussed that last time,
Yeah.
I've had sleep cycles since then.
I think the conclusion was just that we would maintain it at the current time and then vote to make it longer, or to start earlier if we need to on a case-by-case basis.
That is correct.
And occasionally we may have a special call, meeting.
For a particular
And
project.
we still have to advertise it and all that, right?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah.
Which comes to something that I wanted to talk about real quick. I would like to do a special call work session. One thing is your email to the commission and the city manager concerned me a little bit, and I feel some of your concerns. I think that it would be a great idea for us to have a special work session to discuss ideas and projects and to get an update from a complete run-through from the start of our middle school property, from the park service. I'd like for us, to get caught up, because I was gone like 6 or 7 years in that process, and you guys are new. You've got 3 new ones. Ed's the only one, and Tim. I'd like to have a session where that we could sit and be updated from the start to the current situation where we are now.
The
With the
only thing I
land
would add to
conversion
that-
agreement? Are you talking about the land conversion agreement with
I'm-
MPS and CDEC?
Yeah, I just would like to be briefed on everything
Okay.
from the start up to date.
Okay.
And that way, we're all on different pages here, we're getting information here and there, and I'm getting we're just on too many different pages. If we have a meeting and it's all set out for us, we know exactly where we're at, where we've been, and where we're going.
So you specifically want it on the land conversion agreement and where we stand with any, review of potential replacement properties, et cetera, and not specifically about like development of that property?
No, no
Okay,
development.
okay.
I just want to be updated from the start, because we've had so many conflicting things from different people from the National Park Service. I just, you know, I'd like to be informed on every bit of the process. And then in that meeting to discuss other things that we need to discuss, like our ideas for future projects. I mean, you know, we don't have time to sit in these meetings and do that. We're not allowed to talk to each other any other way. So I just think that might be a good idea to get us all on the same page, per se, and to see where we're going.
You know, just as long as both of those things are, it has to be clearly delineated, yeah, what we're gonna be talking about on the
Right.
agenda, okay?
Yeah, I think that sounds great.
Yep.
So the vision meeting would be a different, a different meeting?
I would think it would need to be,
Yeah,
right?
Okay.
like one all along.
It would, and I would like to see it happen soon right after that. Let's plan revisions, you know? And I would like to see us all bring what we see, and let's see see if there's any common ground. I believe you'll be amazed how close we are.
Now, I did actually just give Tim I photoshopped a blank map of the middle school property that you can now find on the website with the proposals. It's just a map with a whiteout where, you know, we have to work with, and it has the staircases marked and the driveways
Okay.
marked and the mature trees line marked if you want to keep any of those things.
Okay.
So you
How big is it? Is it just the middle school property, or is it
Well,
expanded out with the middle school?
It goes out a little bit. It's mostly
Okay.
the middle school property. It goes out a little bit, and it's designed so you can print it out on our standard 8.5 by 11 printer paper. You could blow it up bigger if you wanted to, or you could get on GIS if you want to
Yeah.
go outside the color outside the line.
Well, me? No.
But yes,
Obviously.
I think that would, you know, if you're content to color within the middle school property,
Okay.
that is available on the website, so you guys are welcome to, like, sketch out any ideas that you have and bring them to the meeting. I think that would be really cool.
Gosh, we have, you know, it's a good school.
Yeah, yeah, I'd love to see that too.
I'm sorry, when we have a special called meeting, and I know that's open to the public, but it's open for public input and comments as well, is
No.
that correct?
No.
No.
Special meetings are
Special
like
Just for us?
It's just for us.
But the public can attend?
Yeah, they can
They can
attend,
attend.
yes.
Okay, all right,
If
okay.
we put public comments on the agenda, can
Yeah,
we
but that defeats
comment?
the purpose.
Yeah,
that
people
defeats the
breaking
purpose.
in and
You know,
save all that for another meeting.
yeah,
Okay.
that's more like a public hearing.
Mhm.
We don't want to do that
Okay.
at this point. This is just for us to see where we are as a board, because we're not synced, and we need to do that.
Get on the same page with where we're at with this
We need
agreement and everything.
to, yeah,
Okay.
we need to do that.
Okay. Do we need to go ahead and schedule that? Or do you want to do that?
I'll send out an email you guys with some dates, let me look and see where we're at. You know, we got budget time coming up and a lot of things, so, I'll try to figure out something here in the next few weeks where we can talk about it.
If we schedule that ahead of time, I mean, we will, and advertise it and everything like that, do you think we could get anybody like James and Sliger from TDEC to join us for that meeting, to attend the meeting in case we have any questions?
Yeah, I might be able to, I'll just have to check.
Okay. Okay, let's see, we're still on formalizing agenda work session, so, no changes to that? All right. So number 6 is amendment to transportation improvement project. Do you want to introduce that one, Tim?
Yeah, that's fine. Back in 2015, when we were doing talked about and applied for the signalization improvement project along Dayton Boulevard and was approved, we had to turn in an estimated cost estimate at that time. Well, we're to the construction phase now, and our estimate back then doesn't match what we need now. So this resolution fixes that so we can move on to construction, and we would need an additional $72,021.74 before the state will release that to go to construction.
But that's, gonna be, that's still subject to
Yes,
80/20?
yeah, that's correct.
So only 14 something will be coming from the city budget, is that correct?
I don't have a calculator in front of me, but I'll trust you that you have.
Okay.
Can you, what are the details of this project and why has it been almost 6 years and it hasn't been started?
Because government works slow.
There you
That's
go.
true. That's true.
You know, I mean,
I
you
just
know,
didn't know if there was like any blockades with like, you know, the funding wasn't received or the construction contract fell through or, you know.
No, it wasn't. It just the way it's phased out. We had COVID involved in there. You have state and federal monies both that have to release those. And so during our last outbreak, they held on to those funds, so it's just shifted this thing back year after year.
So what's included in this project?
5 signalization upgrades at Signal Mountain Road, Morrison Springs Road, Ashland Terrace, and 2 over on each side of Highway 27 off of Morrison Springs Road.
That's just like the sidewalks up Ashland Terrace. That's been going on for many years, and it's just now coming up.
Okay, I have one other question about that, on page 2, number 3, that the city manager is further authorized to sign and execute such other further and general documents as necessary in order to reflect a not to exceed 5% contingency for further increased amounts of the newly authorized construction cost estimate of $1,435,021.74. Is that saying that's giving you the power to add an additional up to $71,751.87 to the cost of this, the construction, without bringing it back before the board?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, well, what'll happen is, these are cost estimates. We see they've changed.
Yeah,
We still haven't bid the project. Well, the
Right.
project could still come in higher than what the cost estimates are, so this allows the city manager to go ahead and approve, if that's the case, to keep this thing moving without having to, another 2 weeks or whatever it is, to come back in front of the board.
And that's pretty standard. That's a pretty standard budget that it's done.
I think the standard is anything over 10,000 has to come before the board for
Well,
a vote.
It's
That's
before
what's
you
in the-
right now, that's what.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, if it's been sitting around since 2015, I wouldn't think that 2 more weeks to get a vote through would be a major.
That's up to y'all. We can,
That's right, it's up to you.
it's up to you.
I would like to see it come back before us if
Okay.
it's, you know, over the 10,000.
But what would you do if it is up, like if you say it's 10,500, well, we're gonna hold up the project for just a few?
It's more for like, an awareness and informational purposes, so that I know if we're having to spend an extra almost $72,000.
Now, our part would be 5% of that. It's a 5%, a 20% match, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
20%
Okay.
Of the 70.
So, okay, if it's
So
under the
that's-
10,000 mark, I don't,
That
I, that's,
20% of 70 is 14.
Okay.
If the city portion is below, I
Yeah.
mean, we're barely over 14, it wouldn't have had to come before us, if it was even a
But
little
like,
longer.
but like he said, this hasn't even gone out to bid. This is just,
Okay.
like we have gone out here, we've secured this funding, and then we gotta take it out to bid. And then he has the authority to do that without having to come back to it. I don't
But
see
you're
any
saying
problem with that.
it would be only around 14,000 more,
Well, the 5% of the total amount
which is the
would
70.
be the 70-something figure.
Yeah.
And 20% of the 70 would be 14,000.
Okay, well then, yeah, I'm fine with it.
And plus Tim's he's city manager, he's always, anytime there's any spending like that, he's gonna notify us.
I just misunderstood. I didn't realize that it was 20% of the 5%. So
Okay.
that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions regarding the transportation project? All right.
Just ready to get it started.
Amen. Public hearing, number 7, public hearings. We have 3 today. Those all come recommended to us from the planning commission, although most of them have conditions included. Any questions about those?
There's a few, I think there's some typos
Okay.
in some of them, a couple of them.
Okay, if you can get those to me, because these will require
That's just the
two
first
readings,
reading,
so
yeah.
we
I
can
just-
fix those before the second reading.
Yeah, there's a couple of and the only comment that I had about was about the Edgewood Drive, 303 and 305 Edgewood, the condition that the planning commission added, adequate plans for construction of, or installation of stormwater infrastructure must be provided subject to approval or disapproval of city administration prior to any building permit issued. Who is the city administration that would be, is that you?
Mhm.
Okay. I would like it to be approved by a professional engineer who deals with stormwater management, who could review that plan.
Okay.
Who would the cost fall to on that thing? Would the cost be
New Paltz City. I can do that.
We have PEs that specialize in stormwater management. I mean, my husband's a PE, but he's the electrical type, so that's not his forte.
Okay, I got the note down.
Now, let's see, we have on the Lashment Road, 5309 to Lashment, does anybody know what the acreage is on that parcel?
I do not right off. He should be here tonight, be able to answer your questions on that.
Okay, I'll ask him during the public hearing then. And then let's see, we have we've made it to any other business. All right.
And it's 6.
Oh, it is. Does anybody have anything that they urgently want to address before we adjourn for our next meeting? Okay, Pete, you sent an email to all commissioners recently expressing an interest in discussing again the alcohol ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Have you asked for that to be added to the agenda?
I have.
Is there, Tim, what's the bottleneck in getting the alcohol ordinance? What are we waiting on at this point?
Probably in June, maybe July.
What are we waiting on?
Well, we've got the budget coming, and I just can't fit it in right now with everything else we got going on.
Would you want to call a special meeting to cover that topic?
I don't know.
Because any two commissioners, I believe, can call a special meeting. So if you would like to, we can schedule that just like we got with the middle school conversion.
Well, let's schedule this, well, let's put it on this one, and then we'll put it on the next one, and just make sure that we're, there's not something else that's more important than that. But I did put it, I did ask him to put it on there, but we're kind of full on our agenda.
Well,
You know,
for our regularly scheduled session, but we
Right.
can always meet, we can vote to meet earlier, or we could call a special meeting to make sure that the topic gets addressed. It's all about looking.
I'm good at calling it early. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, 4:30, we can do it at 4:30 on the next meeting. I mean, it
Okay.
won't take us half an hour to
Do
discuss it.
we want to go ahead and move the April 20th meeting up to 4:30 so that we can go ahead and fit that on the agenda?
Yeah.
Does that sound okay to everyone here?
I'm good with that.
Does that work for you, Tim?
You'll have to. That's what you're wanting.
That's what we want.
So, there you go.
Okay, excellent. In that case, we'll adjourn the work session.